Hi, and you're very welcome to the Women's National League podcast here on finalwhistle.ie. My name is Breifne and Aaron, and I'm joined once again this week by Aaron Clark of the WNL show. Aaron, you're very welcome back.
Thanks for having me again. Good to be excited to see how tonight goes. Another packed show.
It's been a packed week of action last weekend over the league, and of course, we have to really start in one location. I don't think it's where we expected we'd be starting 7 days ago, but Athlone. What is going on at Athlone? 1-0 winners in Piemount, and probably deserved 1-0 winners. It wasn't a complete snatch and grab from the Midlanders. They really were worth the performance on Saturday evening.
Yeah, I wouldn't mind. I tweeted saying that people need to start giving Athlone the credit they deserve, and I got a reply back from somebody saying, "Oh yeah, they just hoof it long," and I had to laugh because I was like, they actually try and play things the right way. Tommy has a side set up superbly. Emily Corbett, an 8th league goal of the season, massive from an Athlone player, considering they didn't score an awful lot of goals last year. I think that's the biggest thing for them. They're actually scoring goals in these sort of games, and they've learned how to maybe cut out the silly mistakes that were happening last year that were costing them in tight games and things like that. But 5 wins in a row, and to be honest with you, Breifne, like I said last week, I said if they score early against Piemount could be in trouble with defending, with just coming back into a game, having seen them 2 weeks previous struggle against Bohs and struggle against Shelbourne to get a goal when they were from behind. But like I was on a different game on Saturday, which we'll talk about later, but I watched the last 25 minutes on my phone, and apart from one opportunity where they hit the crossbar, Piemount, Athlone, Niamh Coombs had barely anything to do in that stage. She wasn't overly worked, and she there wasn't as if Piemount of old piling the pressure on, having the keeper having to pull off 50 million saves to keep them in it. And to me, and I had this question with someone else, and is the air of invincibility around PRL Park gone now that teams maybe don't fear going there as much as maybe they had in the last couple of years? Because there's been times where Shelbourne have gone there last year and got beaten out the door 5-0. Other teams have gone out there being beaten 6-7, 8-0. Like, you just look at last year, Athlone played up there and were hammer hockeyed out the gate. Massive turnaround, and I think massive credit has to go to Tommy and the staff as well as the girls, because to keep 4 clean sheets and 5 wins, in this league is absolutely magical, and now sees them draw level on points with Piemount, which we wouldn't have thought we'd have been talking about at the start of the season.
Absolutely not. And I think it's the consistency for me over the last 3 or 4 or 5 weeks has been the most impressive thing with Athlone. They've been really solid at the back. Yeah, they're a little bit direct, but they're not hoof merchants, to be honest. It's not a case of just hoof along and hope somebody gets on the end of it. It's a very definite direct style of play, but it is effective. And Emily Corbett has really grown into that role this year. I know we've seen her in action for underage Irish teams over the years, and she's flattered to deceive at different games, but she's really kind of grown into that main leading striker role for the team in the last couple of weeks.
Absolutely. I also think the fact that TUS Midlands had such a good run in the colleges helped massively coming into the National League, because a lot of them girls are playing together regularly as well. And the biggest thing is they've got continuity. The last couple of years we saw, maybe it's the same we saw a little bit with Athlone's men in previous seasons, where a lot of players seem to come in and some seem to go mid through season. Whereas the biggest thing is now they've sort of got a settled squad, a settled lineup, and they're able to they're building off that blocks. And like as you say, sometimes no disrespect to some teams, but you have to hoof along, but there's a time and a place for it. And I think that's their biggest thing, is that they know when to do it. And as we say with Emily, yeah, she hasn't always set the foot alight at underage international, but she's blossoming now to where there's going to be chances for her. The thing you're going to have to ask yourself now is one of the so-called top teams going to be looking and saying, hold on, here's a striker who's scoring goals week in, week out. I think that's one thing that's probably been lacking quite for a long time within the National League, since the likes of Rihanna Jarrett left, Claire Shine left. There's been no out-and-out striker. Stephanie Roach this year is scoring good goals for Piemount, but there hasn't in recent years. It's more been wingers coming from other places, that we've never had real out-and-out strikers that are going to get you banging goals. And Emily seems to be one for Athlone, and while they're relying on her a little bit, as long as she keeps delivering and her teammates keep helping her, they're going to continue to cause teams an awful lot of trouble.
Yeah, Piemount on the other side, I think they're missing a couple of the girls they've lost over the last 12 to 18 months. There's a couple of girls gone to England. I know the likes of Niamh Farrelly, Nisha McAloon in goals. They've lost others. Eleanor Ryan Doyle has crossed the city to Piemount. There's there's been a kind of a exodus from PRL Park of sorts. You know, they've lost a little bit of that steel in the midfield as well, with a couple of players not available. Dervla Byrne hasn't featured for them this year. I know she's in UL, playing a bit of Gaelic with the college, hasn't been playing soccer this season. And there are others, I think, name escapes me right now, but the girl from Westmeath, Lucy, is it?
Lucy McCarran, she tore her ACL.
Okay, I wasn't quite up to speed on her, but so they're down about maybe 6 or 7 of their squad in recent years. It's a big loss to fill that kind of a gap without bringing in major players like they have done this season.
Absolutely, but you look at just Eleanor Rondoyle gone to Birmingham. It's Megan Smith Lynch has gone back to Shelbourne, who was there previously. But the thing for me is, you're right, the likes of Nia Farrelly, Claire. But look at last season, they beat Shelbourne. They lost to Shelbourne 4-3 in the league in Talca Park, and then that was the last game for Claire Walsh. Went to Glasgow, and then straight off the bat, Della Doherty went to Wexford. And that was 2 massive losses in centre back. They were nearly having to put Karen and Duggan in there at times, and for me, Karen is one of the best technical players in the league, and if you're having her in centre back, you're losing an awful lot. So they were sort of a bit of a juggling act. He's gone to 3 at the back at times. Dervla Byrne, I think, as you mentioned, is a big loss. Dervla was, she was one of their consistent players week in, week out for them last year. So if to lose her was a big one, but just on bringing players in, they brought Erin McLaughlin in, has done okay for them. But then again, you look at some of the other signs they brought in. They brought in Grace Murray, who was playing up north. Grace Murray hasn't featured in any of the games. I was watching pre-season, didn't see her there. You haven't even heard if she's even trained with them. So, they struggled to get players in, and that was the biggest thing. I know they rang around a lot of clubs looking for players, still ringing around clubs now trying to get certain players in to try and fill the gap, because I think they know they have a massive gap at the back, and until they plug that, it's gonna be tough for them. But stopping a rot is also as hard as stopping a winning train. And I think for them this weekend, they'll have another massive game where if they don't get 3 points out of this weekend, we're talking then, as I said, as we were talking about the top 3 last week, will they get there? That's when them questions start to come even more. But I think for James, the biggest thing at the moment is, can he get to the transfer window with as least damage as possible? So where he can look at trying to bring in a couple of replenishments, because we don't know yet fully if Eleanor Ryan Doyle is going to stay on with Birmingham, who are relegated. There could be 1 or 2 other players potentially to come back across. You could see Amber Barrett, if she doesn't get a club in the WSL as she's looking for, could potentially look to come home if she doesn't get the right move. There's others then as well, and plus the ones who've maybe coming towards the end, the likes of America, if they don't get what they want. So it's, for me, for Peamount, it's all about consolidating the damage and trying to limit the ground that they lose to Shelbourne in these next couple of games.
Yeah, and I suppose the biggest gap that we're concerning Peamount at the moment is the gap in the points to the top of the table. Shell's 3 points taken from Dalymount to the weekend. Fairly routine, solid performance from them. They looked fairly straightforward winners in that game. I know you were at that yourself. Your thoughts on it?
I thought both were decent in defence for the first 30 minutes or so, but as soon as Saoirse Noonan scored, you could see then they were sort of chasing the game and they're opening up a lot more space, and Shells then just took over completely. Maybe it was a case that Shelbourne just needed to get going and get started, but as soon as Shells did, they comfortably controlled the game. Jess Sue grabbing the second, and then Noelle Murray with a lovely finish for the third. But the thing is, they could have had more if they wanted. Being honest, it was one of them sort of games that if they wanted to be ruthless, they could have been ruthless, and they could have scored 5 or 6. Noel really rang the changes. He brought 3 on at one stage, then brought another 2 on. Interestingly, Abby Larkin didn't come on, was on the bench. A lot of talk was potentially is she going to be in the next Ireland squad? She didn't come on, which was surprising to me. So I don't know whether there was an injury there or something's gone on, but that was the big surprise and talk probably leaving Dalymount on Saturday, was that she didn't come on.
I think one of Noel's, having seen him close up over the years, Noel doesn't make a whole pile of substitutions for no reason. So I think when he got the opportunity, he maybe give girls who are less likely to feature in other games later in the season a run. But anyway, that's kind of Shelbourne.
Just before you do, Breifne, just a quick one for you. We were talking about Peamount. Shelbourne have conceded 1 goal in 10 games, 9 clean sheets. That's the difference at the moment.
Absolutely, and I think it's key, because even when you look at the league table, Peamount, okay, fair enough, they're still in second or in third on the table, but they've conceded 11 goals. That's a huge difference between 11 and 10 versus 1 in 10. you mentioned it last week on the show about defences, and I think that's been the key difference why Shells are so far up the league table at the moment. In terms of the games, we're going to get to DLR and Sligo last on the list, because we are going to be joined by Gemma McGuinness, the Sligo winger, who's been impressive in the league so far this year, twice in the team of the week over those 10 game weeks. But maybe let's move down south first of all. Cork City, new manager on the sideline after the switch during the week last week. Jess's first game in charge, fairly impressive from them, 2-1 against Wexford. I think everybody involved with the club will be happy on the face of it. Maybe disappointed not to get the point in the end, but still much improved performance from the Cork girls.
Absolutely, but you also talk about, you see people on social media as well, and they're all talking about it, whereas, sometimes you see the negative side when you're not winning these sort of game, but we're seeing a lot of them talking about how there was a different sort of vibe, a different sort of, work rate to Cork City. I think for Jess Lawton, I think it was important just to go in there and just do steady, as we said last week, she's not going to go in and get results overnight. She knows that. She's not expecting that, but what she's expecting is just to go in, consolidate the group of players, see what she has there. They brought Zara Foley's come back from America recently and has joined up with the squad. Maria Sullivan has come in as well to give another option to go, but Abby McCarthy's been quite decent for them at times this season as well. Made a couple of team of the weeks as well. And in terms of a Wexford point of view, good win for them. Emma Walker scored in her debut. One thing that we can't say about Stephen Quinn is that he's not willing to give young players a try. He's given so many different young players like Cyan Burdiff a run out just to see how they are, if they're impressing with the underage structures. And I think that's one thing that they're building nicely in Wexford, is that they're getting a lot of players who are getting a bit of exposure to this level at a young age, and they're able to, slot in then when people are missing. Like you look at Maeve Williams has had to buy her time in goal, but now starting to reap the rewards of getting the opportunities in goal. Ellen Malloy scoring again. Ellen is just Ellen. Ellen will score if you give her that opportunity. I think we're probably just lucky to continue to have the opportunity to watch the likes of herself play. Becky Castle obviously got a lovely goal for Cork, but I do think it's a good reaction for Cork, and there's a lot to build on. And from a Wexford point of view, it sets them up nicely for the weekend.
Yeah, we might talk about Cork a little bit more with their visit to Sligo in a few moments with Gemma McGuinness, who joins us. But as we look towards the last two games of last weekend, down the west-hand side of the seaboard, we had Galway United and Treaty in Amadisi Park. Galway will be very happy with those 3 points. I know Treaty have been a bit of a pushover this year. Apologies to anyone down there, but it's been a relatively straightforward 3 points for everybody, still scoreless on that league table. But Galway will be happy with all 3 points coming out of that, and just kind of given a chance to restart their season and go again.
Absolutely. Jenna Slattery scoring twice against her old club. She'd be happy as well. Again, and Shauna Brennan with the other goal for Galway. I think for them it was just about getting 3 points in another performance, because they've sort of, as we say, they've been a bit hit and miss, and I think this is their opportunity. A couple of games to go before the international break and then the mid-season break. So if they can get a run of games going with what's happening above them, there's no reason why they can't close that gap. And as you said, there could be an opportunity to pip into that top 3 position. But this is where we'll see if they can build that bit of momentum. But for them, it was a routine enough win. For Treaty United, I think they'll be happy just keeping the scoreline down. As we said, they're still building. They're in the early phases of their building phase, so we probably won't see an awful lot from them in terms of results for another year or so. It reminds you a little bit of Cork City when they had the massive changeovers. How they went through a long time without winning games and stuff like that. But I think things will come good. It's just going to take a bit of time.
Final game of last weekend. Take a look back over. Sligo Rovers made the journey up the N4 to DLR to Belfield. Probably the most entertaining game of the weekend. DLR huffed and puffed. Sligo produced a really solid performance like they've done a couple of times this year. But DLR just had that little bit of extra guile in the end, and a late Kate Mooney header saw them take all 3 points. Your thoughts on that particular fixture?
You know what? Sligo will be hating coming to Dublin. I know they got the 3 points against Peamount in the boardroom, but they've had a late loss against Shelbourne and a late loss against DLR Waves. The loss against Shelbourne, they didn't deserve at all. They were well in that game. Same again here, well in the game, and it's a late goal that sees them lose the points. We had Kate Mooney on last week, and delighted for Kate to get back on the score sheet after only being on like 7-8 minutes. I was talking to her in Dalymount after she come over the second half, and you could just see the smile was there, everything was there. And for Sligo, they'd be bitterly disappointed, to come out, especially having led the game and then clawed it back after being 2-1 down. They would have thought they could have come away with it. But I think for me, the biggest thing is at this sort of level, a little bit of experience is probably where maybe later on down the season they won't concede that late goal and they may come away with that point.
Absolutely. Well, someone who's going to give us a bit of a better opinion, a much more closer look, particularly that first goal, is the winner for Sligo Rovers, Gemma McGuinness, who did open the scoring in DLR at the weekend. She joins us now. Back in just a second. And Gemma, you're very, very welcome to the Women's National League podcast here on finalwhistle.ie. Congratulations, I suppose, on the goal at the weekend, your selection for Team of the Week. I believe it's your second, if not your third, so far this season. You're collecting them like you wouldn't believe.
Yeah, no, obviously delighted to get in Team of the Week, but the biggest thing was the disappointment in the result, and that's all that really matters at the end of the day. And like Aaron was saying there, like at this level, you're going to get punished, and it is those slip ups and mistakes that we tend to be making. And a few of the matches that are letting us down, and we understand what we need to improve on. So I suppose going forward, it is looking at those small things that we can improve on and make less mistakes to make sure that we are kind of holding those results that we should be and getting the winners and making sure we're not getting last minute losses.
But in terms of, looking at where you are as a season at the moment, Gemma, you probably wouldn't have expected to maybe have got the amount of results that you did, is because it's a daunting league when new teams do come in. Some we see it takes nearly half a year to get a result where you were straight on the bat, you were competitive, first day out against Piedmont, while you got the result in the end. You showed glimpses then the week after against DLR, you showed more, and you just continued to show more leading up to your first win.
Definitely, I've probably been a bit harsh there, but I suppose that's the kind of standards that we're setting for ourselves from day one, and that's kind of, that's what took my eye from the start of the season, and even wanting to join Sligo, was that mentality from the background team, and even the feeling of going into the training sessions. It's constantly, we're pushing the standards every single week, and that's really what we're looking towards, pushing and progressing each and every week and making sure that we are getting better. Like we understand we have a lot of work to do and we're a new team. So I suppose giving ourselves that credit, as well as knowing that we can push on and progress each week.
If memory serves, your previous Team of the Week selection was also against DLR, so maybe they're your good luck charm, even if they haven't quite brought a result on the scoreboard just yet. In terms of, I suppose, how the team has progressed, we look at the first round of games, and we kind of talked about the Piedmont game and the DLR game, and there were defeats, and there were fairly obvious defeats, if you don't mind me saying, at the time. But now it's an awful lot more competitive. Like the fact that you took the game to DLR away only 8-9 games, 10 games later, it really shows signs of the progress that you've made as a unit, as a setup. Because I know a lot of those girls have been involved with the underage team 5 or 6 years ago, and it's you've pulled them together from virtually from nowhere in some respects. Like nobody really would have played much together in the last 5 or 6 years, and yet you seem to have become a really tight unit, both socially as well as on the field.
Yeah, and I think that connection within the team is so important, and it really shows on the pitch. The better that you are, the closer that you are, and the more connected that you can become as a unit. And I think, again, that's credit to the background team, I suppose, understanding that side of the game and understanding how important it is. And every week, like we are talking about the importance of that. And I suppose a couple of the girls, I would have known them from playing years ago, so that kind of helped me going into the team. But like the majority of the girls, we didn't know each other from the start of the season. And to look back and see how far we've come now, it's nice to see that we are gelling well together, and we're seeing how, it's hard to measure that on the pitch, but I suppose if you can sense it and feel it in terms of how we're actually doing, maybe the results aren't showing right now, but I can feel that in the future that will show and prove itself. Yeah.
What sort of, triggered you to make the move? Because you were obviously playing on the Northern Irish League, to come down to a new team. Some people say it's a brave ask to go to a new team. Maybe you could have looked at someone else in the National League. But what was it that guided you towards Sligo?
Yeah, well, so I was playing with Derry City, but that was actually that was about 4 seasons ago now, because I was actually living in Vietnam for 2 years in between that. So when I came back, there just at Christmas, I did go to Derry City for a couple of training sessions I suppose I had my sights set and that was where I was going to play. And then it was kind of Sligo Rovers where the contact, it was one of the girls, Lauren, reached out and just asked if I wanted to go down to a training session. And again, I've said this before a couple of times, like, but as soon as I went to that training session, like the standards were quite different to what was currently set up with Derry City. And I suppose that really stood out to me. And I felt like that's where I wanted to play. If I was going to play seriously, like that's what I wanted it to be. I wanted it to be a good setup and with strong standards set. And that really made all the difference for me. And it hasn't dropped either, which is something that you might tend to see further on the season, but it's definitely not. And I'm each week, I am more motivated to go down regardless of the journey.
Talk to us a bit about Vietnam. I know it's not technically football related, but how does a girl from North Donegal end up in Vietnam for 2 years in the middle of a worldwide pandemic? And why do you not come home?
I know, a bit mad, but I went over, it was before the pandemic. So I went over with intentions of doing a bit of traveling around Asia and work as well. So I went over and I was teaching science in a secondary school. So I'd done that for 2 years and didn't get near as much travel as I would have hoped, obviously, but it was an incredible experience. And yeah, like there's loads of Irish over there. So it was a really comfortable setting too, even though, there was a lot of madness around that. Probably the best 2 years of my life. But I'm glad to be back now and then a bit more of a routine that I suppose that I'm enjoying a bit more as well.
And like, was there ever a thought that maybe, when you're away, like, because obviously you're traveling and stuff like that, football maybe is in the back of your minds. What, did you ever have that itch to maybe just to come back and play football? Because, there's no doubt about it. I've watched Sligo a couple of times, and probably the Shelbourne game in particular is where you left the impression on me. I walked away, I tweeted about it that day. Like, was there ever that sort of thought where like other things had taken over, the football was never going to happen again? Yeah,
definitely. Like, it kind of happened to me as well before that when I was out of football before uni. Whenever I went to uni, I wasn't playing football for like 2 years. And a large part of that was, my uni actually didn't have a football team. So there were like the opportunities there as well were slim. So that kind of came back whenever Jordanstown, I was in Coleraine. So Jordanstown was in Belfast and I had to travel there in final year when I realised that I could actually play football for them through Ulster University. So again, that involved a lot of traveling, but that was something that brought me back to football. And that was obviously before Vietnam, but that kind of, I suppose gave me a lot more motivation and drive to, I suppose, try to reach the level that I was at before with the underage international. But then when I went to Vietnam, like, I suppose I was a bit more relaxed and I was kind of focused on just enjoying myself and with work and things like that were going on. And definitely towards the end, especially in the pandemic, I was ready to get back into a competitive setting. And that's when I got back, and I thought that was just going to be Derry City at the time. But I think now it feels like it's increased. And again, just like that setup and within Sligo Rovers, that is definitely spurred me on.
In terms, Gemma, of the season outlook, a lot of people from the outside of the camp at least would have anticipated that the likes of Emma Hansberry and Kristen Sample would have had a huge impact on how Sligo performed this year. And I suppose through injury or whatever reason, Emma's missed a lot of the season so far. And now we see Kirsten is going to be out for a little while as well. So, and yet probably the two best performances have come without having both of them on the pitch at the same time. So is that a positive that the club can take and say, well, actually these girls who wouldn't have had the profile that those two might have brought to the equation at the start of the season are actually stepping up to the plate and putting in a performance here that we can really build something on medium to long term?
Definitely. Like, it's devastating missing the girls. Like, every time Emma steps in the pitch, she has a massive impact in the game and she can play those key passes. And obviously Kristen, she's proved herself time again in front of goal and saving us from maybe a bit more worrying scores. But, without having them in the team, the girls really have stepped up. Like the younger girls that you might have been a bit worried just in the case of not having that experience, but they really have stepped up and proved themselves. Like you've even got the likes of Pixie there, like Kerry O'Hara, who's really been impressive, and she's only like 16 years old, but it just kind of shows you the talent that's coming through, and it's exciting to think that that's the kind of players that you've got involved in the future that's only going to progress and get better. So definitely feel confident for all the girls, and even Amy Mahan as well, just to mention how well she played against DLR. They're stepping in without Kristen in goals. So we've got a good lot of young ones coming through that are really proving themselves.
Yeah, Pixie has really impressed me. I've been following her from kind of underage the whole way up locally here in the Northwest. So it's great to see her getting a game and also making an impact, which is really nice. Sorry, Aaron.
No, don't be worried. Don't be worrying. And Gemma, just when like this league is full of internationals, underage internationals. Like even when you aren't, getting a result and things like that, you're coming up against that sort of standards that it drives younger players because they see the likes of previous seasons they've seen an Emily Whelan. This year the likes of Kiva Keenan who's been in the Ireland squads, Jess Gargan from Shelbourne, just to name a few, who've been in Ireland squads, and you're coming up against them week in, week out. Does that drive the standard amongst the players because they see what's available for them within the league?
It definitely does, and it's hard if you're not getting the results as a team. But I think if you're always concentrating on what you could provide yourself as a player, and how the opportunity is there for you to progress and get better as an individual and do your best within your performances on the team, and that might lead to something else. So even the publicity and the fact that how much exposure the league is getting, I think that's a big spur for the girls as well, and even this kind of setup as well, like to see that women's football is growing in Ireland, and that the opportunities are there if you do want to push on yourself. Yeah.
When we had Kristen on the show earlier in the season, talking to Alana, she spoke about the different skill sets that players bring from their own personal lives and professional lives into a dressing room. She talked about video analysis. I know she's heavily involved within the club on that front. You're a nutritionist by profession. Have you been press ganged into giving maybe some nutrition support within the squad, or even on a structured basis, or just on an ad hoc basis by the powers that be down there, by Steve and the lads and ladies?
Yeah. Nothing structured, but I enjoy having conversations with the girls, and obviously not pushing anything on anybody, but having those key conversations and to know that there are certain things outside of your training that can improve your performance. Like just even that whole performance environment is a massive aspect in your game, and nutrition plays a huge part in that. So it's something I enjoy talking about and discussing with the girls, and some of them come to me and ask for for individual advice, and I feel like I'm always there to have that conversation.
It's mad. I know players who previous years gone by, Breifne, you from the early days in the National League as well, where post-game meals would have been completely different to what they are now, things like that. But just in terms, like we see even with yourself, Gemma, with the likes of your social media, you post things and think, even if the players aren't on your team, you post little tips about how to pre-match prepare yourself, pre-match, post-match. I always find them interesting because a lot of players, nutritionists and stuff like that, sometimes they don't show these sort of things, but you to post them and you to explain what they mean and why to do them. I think that's quite an interesting side that people if they aren't following your Instagram account, I think if you want to give it a shout out as well, and they should, because you provide some good information for them.
Thanks, Aaron. I don't think that there's anything that you should be hiding, and all the information is there and available. So for me, I enjoy sharing that kind of information and helping in any way I can. And the conversations that I mentioned there that I would have with the girls in the drive down the road, they're my inspiration for those kind of posts, asking about pre-match meal, or should I be drinking a sports drink, or whatever it might be. That's kind of information I like to put out. So if it's going to help anybody, if they are following, no matter what team you're on, it doesn't matter.
Well, I think we'll leave the post-match and pre-match suggestions food-wise to you, because my nutrition habits definitely don't need to be shared with anybody. In terms of the weekend, of course, it's Cork this weekend, and it's a big one because I suppose it's the return fixture. You got 2 points down there. You scored the first goal, although I know you got credited with the first goal everywhere. I'm not sure how much you knew about it. I think Abby McCarthy's face had a bit of an involvement in that as well. But how much is it to kind of go back and revisit those memories in the next couple of days of the euphoria of that first win for the club, and maybe setting down a marker and saying that one wasn't a once-off. We're going to go and we're going to take a second result out of this and show that we actually are worth our place above Cork in the league table at the moment.
Yeah, absolutely. Like after that, like that one was fantastic for us. Our first win, first goal, and all that. But straight away we were switched on thinking about the next game, and definitely for this one at the weekend, like it was no easy win for us. And Cork were, they're a really organised team. Like they might not be getting the results this season, but like that might just be coming, especially that new management. It can be a different spark for them this weekend, and I'd say the mentality is completely different. So for us, we're just focused on, we know that we can perform if we've got the mentality right and if we've got everybody on the same page. So yeah, we're looking forward to this weekend and hopefully making it 2 from 2 for that.
Still claiming the goal?
10 on.
Any good player, Will Breifne, don't forget that.
Well, listen, Gemma, it's been an absolute pleasure to chat to you tonight. Well done on your double team of the week selection so far this season. I'm sure it won't be the last one. We'll see your name in that little select group every week that comes out from the FAI. Thanks very much for joining us, giving us your time, and the very best of luck to you this weekend and for the rest of the season with the Bit Red.
Thanks, guys. Thanks for having me.
Aaron, Gemma McGuinness there, thank you very much for joining us. That was a great chatting to her. We did forget one little important piece when we were doing our roundups around the games, and I'm surprised you didn't stop me because it was a bit of your own work, and that was after the Shells Bows clash in Dalymount on Saturday evening. You caught up with Jess Gargan. We might put that little post-match interview in now, if that's okay with you.
Jess Gargan, another clean sheet for the Shelbourne defence. Now that's 9 out of 9 clean sheets in 10 games. Must be extremely pleased with that.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's, for a defender, it's better. Obviously we need to score, but once we score one, our job as defenders, we say to each other, Pearl always says, it's keep clean sheet. Whether we get 2, 3 or 4, it's the clean sheet is more important to us. And we've done well so far this season, but I know it's only early days, so we have to keep it up. But yeah, it's brilliant that we're keeping it and we're solid at the back, and Amanda and the defenders and everyone really defending from the front. We've been doing great, so we need to keep it up.
You're winning games as well. Maybe when you're not having the best of performances, you're not just reliant on goals. You're keeping the clean sheets as well. You're keeping teams out, even maybe when you aren't at 100%.
Yeah, 100%. Especially the first few games. I think DLR was our test where it didn't go so well, and I think we had been getting by up until that game. As you say, we weren't playing the best, and we were winning, which is great, and that shows a good team that even when you're not playing good, you can still win. But I think DLR was a bit of a wake-up call, and it came at the right time. We went into Wexford, we went into Peamount, won them games, which are the really big important ones. So yeah, as I say, maybe last year we were good. The year before we wouldn't have won them games where we weren't playing well. So it shows that we're a good team, that we can still get the 3 points even when we're not playing well. But we want to build into performances now and have good performances and build on the wins.
And how do you feel your game is in particular? Because you've probably gone a little bit under the radar for a lot of people, because they're talking about the likes of Jesse Stapleton and stuff, where you've probably been one of Shelbourne's most consistent players. How do you feel your game is at the moment?
Yeah, I think I've been improving since the start of the season. Probably my last few games I have been better. But yeah, listen, I don't care if other players get the credit. Defenders never really do, but I just want to keep on improving my game, doing my best for the club, and I feel like why I'm playing better is because I'm enjoying it, and that comes from the management and the team. Like, the manager gives me the go ahead to go every time down the wing, and even against the bigger teams, you think you might be a bit more conservative, but Noel always says don't change your game, and having that freedom and the confidence behind you is massive, I think, for any player. So it's a lot of credit to Noel for giving me that go ahead and the confidence to go. It really makes me feel valued as a player, which makes a big difference.
DLR Waves next week, that opportunity to get that game back, that you did lose earlier in the season, so you'll be looking forward to that.
Yeah, absolutely. No, like you just said that there, they're the only team that's caused us problems this year, so we can't rest now. We have to keep on going and build on today's performance. And they're always a tough team to play against. They have it up for Shells every time. Probably half of their team are ex-Shells players, so it's right that they do have it up for us. But it'll be a tough game, and we won't take it lightly anyway. We'll prepare in the right way.
Brilliant, Jess. Thanks.
Thank you.
Jess Gargan there after the game speaking to Aaron. Aaron, I suppose that brings Shells into a comfortable lead at the top of the table this early in the season, but of course they themselves in action again this week, and they'll be hosting DLR Waves. As Jess just mentioned about there, it's probably my game of the weekend in terms of what I'm excited to see about maybe what DLR can bring to a challenge against Shells. They've beaten them already once this year. How's that going to go?
They've always been close games. That's the biggest thing, Breifne. It's like you have to look back a good couple of years before the last time we've seen maybe a massive landslide. It's been 2-1, 1-0. It's always been nip and tuck between the two sides. Last year there was the contentious one where there was the potential foul throw, and then this Shell scored a winner. So I think it's going to be close again. You would have to say that Shelbourne have learned the lessons from the last day. You would have to fancy Shelbourne to come out on top. To be honest with you, if I am predicting that way, I probably would go with a Shelbourne win, but I don't think there will be a lot in it at all. I think maybe 1-0 or 2-1.
Yeah, it's going to be a tight game. We touched on Sligo Rovers and Cork City. Of course, Sligo had first blood in this fixture down in Turner's Cross, probably against the run of play, I think it's fair to say, in that particular clash. But they'll enter this game definitely on a level par, if not even as slight favourites, based on how the season has gone for both sides since.
Yeah, they should enter favourites, especially at home. But the biggest thing is that, we seen Wexford Cork get a response against Wexford last week, and I think that's going to spur them on a little bit more, to look to see what they can do, how much more they can get out of it. I know the likes of Dan Burke has been missing through injury since he came off in the DLR Waves game. So as they start to get players back, the goalkeeping situation for me is an interesting one. Will she go Maria O'Sullivan, or will she go with Abby McCarthy? McCarthy's played nearly every game. Has played every game, so that's the decision that you'll have to see. For Sligo Rovers, I think for them it's about can they back that result up last week? Potentially they can, and I think it'll be a close game. Maybe Sligo, if Emma Doherty finds a score sheet again, Sligo could nick another 3 points, but I wouldn't be surprised if it goes the other way either.
Yeah, I think any team that has Emma Doherty on it always has a chance, and you've seen those long goals into space for Doherty to run onto, and she must have scored 2 or 3 goals this season from that exact scenario. So I can see her scoring every second or third game, and if she gets one this week, it's hard to see Cork coming back and kind of taking, especially away from home. I think I'd fancy Sligo but probably a score draw, maybe with Emma Doherty to get one and someone to get a worldie for Cork at the other end. Galway and Bohemians, they're in action at 6 o'clock. Galway had a nice win last week, confidence boosting 3-0 victory over Treaty. Bows on the receiving end of a 3-0 defeat to Shells. Probably both expected in terms of form. They're both in and around the same spot in the league, though, and I think it's a chance for both teams to really show where they are and maybe how much progress they've made in the last 10 games.
I'm good friends with the Bows management staff and stuff like that, but unfortunately they're not going to like this one. I think this weekend, it is going to be a Galway win, and I'll tell you why. I think Bows, especially if Ciara Maher's missing after coming off injured last weekend, they're also missing Yvonne Hedigan at centre back. They're missing Katie Burtis at fullback as well. They're missing Chloe Darby in the middle. They're just starting to drop bodies through injury at the moment. And I think, losing Ciara Maher, especially last week, you could see how much of an impact it had in their defence. And if she isn't right, it could be a difficult afternoon, especially, who's going to slot in there. So I just think Galway will come away with the 3 points.
Yeah, we'll come back and talk about that gap that's beginning to emerge between 6th and 7th. There might only be one place between Galway and Bohemians in the league table, but there's 8 points, and that's massive after 10 games. In terms of the other games taking place this weekend, of course, Peamount make the journey down to Wexford. Usually that would be a top-of-the-table clash, but given the way the results have gone in the last few weeks, neither of them winning 5 points. Peamount 8 points already off Shells at the top of the table. Worrying times for both managers. I think a draw in this game could nearly see Shells have more than one hand on a league title at this early stage. Yeah,
unfortunately, and that's a scary thing. But when they met earlier on in the season, it was played on a Friday night. It just looked as though Wexford never got out of the cars. Peamount just ran away with it. Wexford have also been beaten by Shelbourne at home as well. So they haven't really got any results against the top two sides around them. You know, they're struggling against the sides that are in and thereabouts. It's going to be a difficult game for them. For Peamount, though, I mentioned earlier, stopping the rot is always difficult. You know, they would have thought they'd beat Athlone. They would have thought they would have beat Bows. Shells, they would have thought they're well in there with an opportunity. But to come away with them from them 3 games with just a point, I think it can be a massive detrimental. I do, as I said earlier, think Derry Burn is an absolute massive loss for them at left full. Even going forward, I just don't think they're flowing right on the pitch at the moment for Peamount, and you know, it'll have to be a decent probably 5-star Peamount performance if they are to get something out of the game, just with the form they're on at the moment. And the question you have to ask is, are they capable of doing it? Yes. Will they do it? I'm not sure. I really am on this one.
Like, we have a situation where if Peamount don't win at the weekend, let's just say the game is a draw for argument's sake, and Shells do take a victory against DLR, that's a 10-point gap. I know there's only 11 games gone in the season, but there's only 16 left. Can Peamount close that gap against the Shells side? Will Shells drop enough points, even with the 2 games they have to face Peamount before the end of the season? Is it a foregone conclusion that if Shells win this week, and let's just say for argument's sake that Wexford don't, it's going to be an 8-9 point gap at the top of the table? It could be game over, or is it too early to call?
For me, the biggest thing is it's trying to figure out where Shelbourne are going to drop the points. You know, the DLR game was probably a bit of a blip, whereas other games they sort of didn't look.
Sligo Rovers, they nearly dropped 2 points against Sligo Rovers.
They nearly dropped 3 points against Sligo because if Emma Doherty had looped it in. But you know, you just look at the sort of players that Noel brought on firepower. He brought on Glory Douglas, Saoirse Noonan, Kiva Keenan. He brought them all on to win the game, and you know that's what champions are. They have a big bench this year. They've lots of options. So if Peamount don't win, it's a daunting position, because I don't expect Shelbourne to drop many points in this next series of games.
Absolutely, but for me, the exciting part is that 2nd to 6th location. We'll talk about it, look at the league table in just a couple of moments' time. But for me, the final game of the weekend, then of course Athlone versus Treaty. We have 2 other games, Galway and Bohemians, but we mentioned that Athlone versus Treaty. They are on a fine run of form, 5 wins on the bounce now, I think, for Athlone, or 4 wins on the bounce.
5 on the bounce, yeah.
5 on the bounce, yeah. I was right the first time. But they now face a Treaty United side, but pointless on the league table. You can't see anything else but on Athlone side here. We could actually be looking at a situation where, given the way results might go at the weekend, Athlone could be in the top 2, or definitely top 3, but possibly even top 2, if they can put enough goals past Treaty on Saturday evening.
Yeah, absolutely, and that's something we probably wouldn't have said at the start of the season. And you know,
I don't even think Athlone would have said that at the start of the season.
No, and I think the biggest thing is that, like, you talked to everybody last week, and a lot of people said to me was the Athlone game in Athlone? When you say no, it was in Peamount. I think people think it's a bigger result because it's not in the Astro in Athlone. It's in Peamount. So you know, I would expect them to get the win and get the 6 on the bounce, but then again, you're right. They could be second after the weekend, and then you know we're sort of talking. Like I tweeted the weekend, our Athlone potential top 3 side on form. You'd have to say they could be, but you know,
on form, I'd argue they're top 2 side at the moment. But will they hold that on? Remains to be seen. Do they have the experience in that dressing room to keep that going over the full 27 games of the season? That remains to be seen. Let's take a quick look at the league table, and of course we talked about that gap that's beginning to open a little bit between first and second in the table. Shells on 27 points, that 1 defeat coming at the hands of DLR Waves, but then there's a really nice group of teams together that are going to be very competitive there between Wexford Youths on 22 points, Peamount and Athlone on 19, and DLR and Galway on 17. I think we're going to see a lot of hopscotch as they jump over and leapfrog over each other as games are played over the next couple of weeks before we kind of settle into a end of season situation. But I think any of those 6 teams, and I think Galway are doing very well to be in that group, but any of those 6 teams could challenge for that second place, I believe, at this moment in time. Or am I being a bit generous to a couple of those teams?
Probably in terms of second place, probably yes, but in terms of third place, absolutely. I do think either Peamount or Wexford may pull away in the end from the others. But you're right. The rest are contenders for it. But like if you were to say a Tommy Hewitt that listen, 10 games in, you're sitting 3 points off second place. They'd have probably laughed at you. Like you look at they've conceded less goals than Wexford, conceded less goals than Peamount. Which is madness, especially to look at it that way.
100%, and the same could go for DLR as well. Like their defense has been rock solid. Eve Bandana has been a very impressive stalwart in the nets for me this year for them. I think she's been very, very impressive in the few games I've seen her play, both in person and, of course, on LOI TV. We're going to take a quick look, if I can get it up here now. We're going to take a quick look at the player statistics for the League of Ireland so far. And these, of course, the top scorers, Anya Gorman and Emily Corbett, join top of that particular table. They have 8 goals each. Anya, 1 game less played. Ellen Malloy has 7 goals from her 10 games, while Kylie Murphy and Stephanie Roach joined 4th there on 6 goals so far in the campaign. And a couple of players on 4 points, Jessie Stapleton, Sinead Taylor, Sive Doyle, Noelle Murray, Emma Doherty, Katie Malone, Avril Brierley, and then a host of players on 3. We won't go through all of those, but plenty of players there and food for thought. Some big names there, names we'd expect to see as well, Aaron.
Yeah, absolutely. But for me, one that stands out is Emily Corbett, 8 goals, the least minutes played per game as well for her 8 goals. Like Ella Malloy's been up there for the last couple of seasons. Anya's always going to get you goals. So is Kylie. I think Steph is a little bit unlucky. She lost a couple from when they lost that game, but you'd expect a lot of them to be up there, and I think Emily Corbett's probably a bit of a surprise for a lot of people.
To be fair, Anya Gorman did have 2 goals in that game against Sligo Rovers as well, so she would be out clear were they still to be considered. In terms of clean sheets, Amanda Budden, she had missed 1 or 2 games, but still has 7 clean sheets to her account. Eve Badana, mentioned a few minutes ago, 5 clean sheets in her 10 games, keeps DLR in contention. But again, Niamh Coombs there, 4 from her and 4 from Maeve Williams down in Wexford. They've both broken into the first teams on a regular basis this year. Niamh, I suppose, would have shared the duties there at loan last year. So great to see them kind of coming through, and a few other names making appearances there as well. Rachel Kelly. But I think the surprise for me is Niamh Reid Burke, only 2 clean sheets in 9 games for Peamount. Mind you, Sligo Rovers game would have been 3 and 10 had that result stood. But it's an impressive. It's an area you've talked about being a weakness for Peamount at the back. Conceding goals has cost them games.
Absolutely, but like you look at last year, they did a lot of clean sheets last year, but a lot of clean sheets kept when they were swapping goalkeeper week in, week out. Where this year they don't have that with Nisha McAloon there, and they've sort of struggled as well, as you say, at the back to keep clean sheets. And if they are to progress up that table, I think they're going to need to see Niamh Reid Burke's clean sheet numbers go through the roof. There's no doubt in Niamh's ability. We all know what she's like as a goalkeeper.
Yeah, but I don't think it's fair to say it's 100% at Niamh's hands either, because
absolutely not.
There's been defensive frailty for Peamount all season, like, across the board, and I suppose they're missing the likes of those players we talked about at the opening of the show, the likes of Della Doherty, who's playing her trade in Wexford now, and also Lee Farrelly's in Glasgow, and they've lost a lot. Dervla Byrne, that's probably 3 of their back 4 from last year, or from the first half of last year at least, no longer with the club. It's a huge loss.
I wouldn't put much of the blame on Niamh Reid Burke at all, to be honest with you. There's been times where the defence has just been cut apart, and Niamh has started being the lone soldier left behind, trying to defend the goal.
Absolutely. Well, listen, on that note, I think, Aaron, we probably have annoyed enough people now by criticising their performances over the last 10 weeks, but it has been an exciting 7 days since we were with you last. We hope the next 7 days will be as exciting for you. I know it definitely will be for us as we follow the ups and downs across the WNL over the next couple of days. To Aaron Clark of the WNL show, thank you very much for joining me as always. Pleasure to have you. We might even see you back here next week. We'll have to negotiate. We'll talk to your agent. We'll get something sorted. To everyone listening and watching along on YouTube or on wherever you get your podcasts, do please subscribe to the show. We'd love to have you back every week, and we shall talk to you at 9 o'clock next Wednesday evening again after another busy weekend of action in the WNL. Talk to you then.